Hi everybody, this is a presentation about figurative language. It might look familiar to some of you because I have used this in another class. This is just going to be a quick overview of what kinds of figurative language you can try to incorporate in your essay. What you will need is a notebook and a pencil so you can take notes, and let's get started. Alright, so first of all, what is figurative language? Well, if we want to know what figurative language is, we need to know what literal language is. This is two ways of looking at language. Literal means that you are saying exactly what you mean. You're using the words that mean exactly what you want to mean. There's no interpretation at all. Figurative means that you're using words, but you're using them in a way that they don't mean what they actually mean. They mean something completely different. So when we use words that mean something different than their actual definitions, we are using figurative language. So let's do an example with the word run. This is my favorite example because we all know what run means. It means you're strapping on your sneakers, you're going to get on the treadmill, or you're going to go outside and you're going to work out by going running. You're going to run, right? You would run a 50-yard dash, or maybe you would run inside because it started raining and you don't want to get wet. So run means a physical activity of running, right? And the picture on the slide are of people running. Now I use the word run in a figurative way a lot because I say things like, I'm running to the store. So I'll say to my family, I'm running to the store, do you need anything? And they know what I mean, and what I don't mean is that I'm going to strap on my sneakers and physically run to the store. No, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to the store and go grocery shopping. And so they know that, and they will tell me that they need, apples or strawberries or something at the store, and they know that I'm going to get in the car and drive there. So I am using the word run figuratively. It means something other than what it really means, right? When I say I'm going to run to the store, I mean I'm going to go to the store, or I'm going to drive to the store. Both of those are literal, but I use the word run figuratively. So I hope you can see the difference between them. So let's look at some literary devices. There's lots of words that we do this with, but there's also literary devices that we use to incorporate figurative language in writing especially. So let's take a look at those literary devices next. All right, so we're going to start with metaphor and simile, which I'm sure you've heard of. This is review. Metaphors are a direct comparison, whereas similes are indirect comparisons. And what you do is you're comparing two very unlike things that are very different from each other. You are comparing them. Okay, so sometimes you are going to be comparing things that are alike. So for example, you might say something like, wow, she is really like her sister or her mother or whatever, right? And those are very like things. They're alike. Those are two girls. They're in the same family. You can see how they would be compared to each other because they have some of the same characteristics. That is a literal comparison. This is taking two completely different things that you really wouldn't normally compare to make meaning out of it. Okay, so the two things that I'm going to compare on this slide are ice cubes and people. And ice cubes and people are not alike at all. If a person actually became an ice cube, they would be frozen and dead. So this is two very unlike things. So for the metaphor, this is a direct comparison. So how I would make a direct comparison of ice and a person is I would say, she was an ice cube while she waited for the bus. Now this is not literal. I do not mean that she is frozen solid and dead. What I do mean is that she's at the bus stop and she is really cold because ice cubes are really cold. So being at the bus stop and being an ice cube just means that she's really cold. That's the meaning underneath this, right? She really isn't an ice cube. She's just cold. But I am saying it. She was an ice cube when she waited for the bus. All right. And then if you wanted to do it in a simile instead, this is an indirect comparison because it uses words to compare. Instead of her becoming the ice cube, she was like an ice cube while she was waiting for the bus, right? So you have to use the word like in a simile, or you can use the word as. She was as cold as an ice cube while she waited for the bus, right? So those are the two ways you can use comparisons in order to make meaning when you're comparing two very unlike things. A metaphor is direct, and a simile uses like or as in order to make the comparison. And I always have these little questions down here. The question you should ask, if you think it's a metaphor or a simile, you should be asking, what two things are being compared? You know, what's being compared to what? Are those two things alike, or are they very different? And then to decipher if it's a metaphor or a simile, you should look for the word like or the word as. And if there's no like or as, it's a metaphor. And if there is the word like or as, it's a simile. Okay, so let's move on to personification. Personification is taking non-human things and giving them human characteristics. So you're acting like the things that are not human are human. Like he was as hard as a rock. Well, that's a simile, right? A human and a rock are two different things. And there was the word as. So that's different. Here is the real personification. My chair embraced me as I sat down. So you can see that the chair has an action. It's doing something. Does that make sense? It's not he is as hard as a rock because that is a simile. It's an indirect comparison. A human and a rock are two different things. You're using the word as. This is personification. My chair embraced me. So the chair is doing a human thing, right? As I sat down. Now, the question you should ask here is, can this happen? Can a chair hug? Nope, but a human can hug. So if you're asking if the inanimate object or sometimes you could say the squirrel chatted to my husband while he built the bonfire. Well, squirrels don't just have a chat with another human, but another human would. You know that just means that the squirrel was making a lot of noise, right? And you know that this means that the chair was really soft and that when you sat down, it kind of felt like you're all snuggled in there, like a hug, right? So my chair embraced me as I sat down. Chairs cannot embrace, so it's personification. All right, so next we're on to hyperbole. Hyperbole is a huge exaggeration. It's an overstatement. So my example here is there were 5 million people at the grocery store today. And the question you should ask is, really? There were 5 million people? Does that even make sense? 5 million people wouldn't fit in the grocery store, right? So this is a huge exaggeration, so it's hyperbole. What I really mean is it was really crowded at the grocery store. That's the message that I'm trying to get across. But it's a more interesting way of saying it if I say there were 5 million people at the grocery store. You have like a picture in your head then, right? It just makes it a little more interesting and a little bit more meaningful. So that is really something that I use a lot. I use the hyperbole a lot just in my everyday language. The other thing I use a lot in my everyday language is sarcasm. Sarcasm is when you mean the opposite of what you're saying. So you're using words, but you're meaning those words to mean the opposite. So for example, I might say, yeah, being at the grocery store when it was so busy is really relaxing. And usually there's a tone that goes with it, right? You could hear that in my voice. So relaxing when it's so busy at the grocery store, right? So that sarcasm means the opposite. It isn't relaxing. It is not relaxing at all. In fact, it makes me stressed, right? So it means exactly the opposite of really relaxing. It makes me stressed. So what you ask for that is you say, would it make more sense what they said or the opposite? Be sure to evaluate the tone because you can hear the tone, right? Like if you wake up and you hit your head and you have a headache and then you stub your toe and then you get in the shower and there's no hot water left and you might get out of the shower and go, well, it's going to be a good day today, right? Because you've had a bad day already and you've just taken a shower. So that is sarcasm. All right. The last thing I want to talk to you about are idioms, and I love idioms. And I'm going to go through these really quickly, but idioms are a phrase that makes absolutely no sense. The words that are used do not relate to each other, and usually the phrase is in the dictionary because it's like a word on its own, because it's just a phrase that makes no sense at all. So don't get a bee in your bonnet. This is one of the idioms that my daughter likes to use, and that just means that somebody is irritated about something and they're going to talk to you about it. So like I get a bee in my bonnet when people leave dirty dishes in the sink, and then I start crabbing about it, right? I'll be like, oh, everyone puts all this dirty dishes in the sink. The dishwasher is right next to the sink. How hard is it, right? And then my daughter will say, oh, she's a bee in her bonnet about the dishes in the sink today, right? He's got cold feet means that you back out at the last minute because you're scared. So you can see the auditions here for the play The Snowman, and the snowman is saying, I'm getting cold feet, which is kind of funny because snowmen have cold feet already because they're snowmen. But that just means that he might not audition because he's scared. A lot of times this is used with weddings, if a bride gets cold feet and leaves the groom at the altar, right? You're sunk just means you failed and you can't unfail, like you're just done. Oh, you failed that test? Oh, you're sunk. You're going to fail the class now, right? It's raining cats and dogs. You might have heard that one. It just means that it's raining really hard. Cats and dogs are not falling from the sky. It just means that it's raining really hard. Oh, it's raining cats and dogs out there. I don't know why they have that, but it's true. When pigs fly, that means it's never going to happen. So if you say, oh, I'll marry him when pigs fly, that means you're never going to marry him because pigs will never fly. So that's like very, very clear that it's never going to happen. He's 3 sheets to the wind. He's 3 sheets to the wind means he's drunk. We don't know why, but that's what it means. If you can say, oh my gosh, there was a guy at the party last night and he was 3 sheets to the wind, it means he's falling down sloppy drunk. Okay? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That is usually about a person who is a lot like their family. So if somebody is super duper smart and has really smart parents, you would say, oh, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree there. And then, of course, she went down in flames, or she crashed and burned. Either one. It means she failed. She went down in flames. So those are just some idioms. There's a whole bunch, and I hope that you can think of more because these make writing really interesting to read. All right, so there are more examples of figurative language. There's alliteration that we didn't go over on this, but I think I've gone over in a different presentation. There's onomatopoeia, and so you can look that up if you want to. There's a whole bunch of other figurative language, but those are all we're going to focus on for now. I hope you learned something. And then I always, if you want to do this in your notebook, this is a challenge for you. You can choose one of these images and try and write something using figurative language that describes these one of these pictures. So you can do that as well. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of a rundown of figurative language, and hopefully it helps you think about how you can incorporate some figurative language in your paper to make it more beautiful